Welcome to some feedback on your recent Germany end of unit exam that was based on the June 2013 paper. The paper, sources and mark scheme are all available on the school shared area. They're also available from the AQA website. Section A is the mandatory section, it's the bit you've got to do, and largely you're basing your answers on inferences, but possibly more important than that, given our aspirational target grades, you are basing your answers on complex inferences. So you need to go back through your answer and have a look, where did you say something that was beyond just an inference, just an obvious working out from the answer? Where did you go beyond what the source was telling you? And that's the same whether you're dealing with question 1A or question 1B. As you can see there, question 1B talks about developing complex inferences from sources C and D and from A and B. So you've got to take your complex inference you used in 1A and repeat it to compare it to the complex inference you've made in 1B. Question 1C we are very familiar with, and this is all about explaining the differences between, because you haven't done that yet, you've only talked about what they tell you, not why they are different. You are now explaining the differences between them based on author, audience, time or place, which some people might find it easier to remember as TAP. You're not going to be able to identify all four of them. It will depend on the source, and it's up to you to spot what it is that the examiner is looking for you to say about those particular sources. So for example, if the sources are all at the same time, then you can't talk about time. It doesn't work. Where you're looking to extend your answer, so we're looking for, as always, developed reasoning to get level 3. That is, they are different because of the difference in time, and then you go on to explain something about the time that will mean that they are different, or something about the author. One author is English, one author is German. This means that they will have a different view because. It's the because bit that will get you the developed thing. The difficulty is to try and get level 4, because here we're trying to provide some explanation of the links between the reasons for the source differences. So it's the links between the time and the author, or the place and the author. So clearly when you were doing 1C, you should have been talking about how some of the sources, or at least one of the sources, was produced in Czechoslovakia. Different place, different author, and therefore a different view to what was shown in the German produced, made in Germany sources seen in A and B. Question 1D, usefulness. Usefulness is about how useful is it to you as a historian, and all sources are useful. Please, please do not make the mistake of saying it's not useful because it's biased. It's perfectly fine to recognise that it's biased, but that still doesn't stop it being useful. The place you're pitching yourself at, you're talking about two different things. You're talking about content and you're talking about provenance. So provenance is where or who it's from, as opposed to the content, which is what is in it. Appalling grammar. So you're explaining that it's useful because of what's in the source, what it's telling you, that's the content, and you're explaining that it's useful because of the provenance, because of who wrote it. But you're also trying to explain how those two things link together. And the link together is about saying that because of what it says and based on who it said it, that makes it more useful. It is more useful if they're talking about Germany and it's written by a person from Germany. It's more useful if you're thinking about Nazi policies if the source was produced by a Nazi. That makes its content more useful because they are going to be in a position to know. Question 1E is the real test of your revision. It's the real test of what you know, because you're looking to talk about several factors. You're looking to talk about several factors in specific detail. It's not enough to say that it was hard to resist because the Nazis had the secret police. It was hard to resist because the Nazis had the SA. That's not specific detail. You need to be talking in great depth for each of the factors about how that made resistance difficult or why it was so difficult to resist. In order to get level 4, which is the top, you need to be then evaluating the relative importance of those factors. That means not necessarily having a conclusion at the end where you say, and therefore this is important because, but perhaps doing that while you're doing your answer. So perhaps saying, the use of the SA was a very important reason why people found it difficult to resist the Nazis. Move on to another factor, the use of propaganda. The use of propaganda was so widespread that it made it difficult for people to know the truth and therefore limited their access to information, which made it difficult to resist. But this is less important than, for example, another factor such as the popular support that Hitler enjoyed. His successes meant that people supported him. Therefore, it was hard to find people who would be opposed to him. So you were isolated if you were in opposition. If you're going to get a top level, several factors is more than 3. Several factors is at least 4, realistically. Given that they're going to give you 8 marks, you're going to need 4 of them. And then you're going to need to do some form of evaluation of at least some of them in order to make a decision about what's the most important reason why. And obviously that will depend on what the question is that's asked. Section B obviously gives you a choice, question 2 or question 3. Overwhelmingly, question 3 was the more popular answer that I marked, but it possibly will depend on the group. For A, key thing, broader context. Some solid information about why something is important, but put into the context of what it was like at the time. So the Treaty of Versailles is important to Germany because of the impact it had at the time on Germany. You could possibly have also referred to what conditions were like after the war. That would have given you some context. Or you could have talked about the impact that the Treaty of Versailles has in the longer term. Again, that would be placing it in some form of context. There are less sources to use in section B, which is why it's possibly seen as being a bit of a harder section. However, for question 2, they do give you a source, and you need to make sure you use the right one. So make sure you're talking about source F or source G if you did question 3. And obviously, in order to get 8 marks, you're going to need to include lots and lots of your own knowledge. A singular cause, probably based on the picture, will get you 3, 4 or 5 marks, but that's not enough, is it? So we are looking for more than one cause, more than one reason why something happened. In this case, more than one reason relating to the failure of revolts and rebellions. So why did they fail? The source gives you one idea. You then need to talk about other reasons and other ideas. The Weimar may not have had support of everybody, but the opposition was divided amongst itself. So the left wing and the right wing didn't agree, therefore mounted separate challenges. The use of people like the workers, the use of the Freikorps, these are all reasons that you could use to explain the failure of revolts and rebellions. There is no evaluation in this question. You're just explaining, this might explain why. This is another reason why. This is a cause of why. And if it's saying more than one cause and there is 8 marks available, I think you need to be looking at least 3, if not 4. If you can explain 3 in great detail, that probably would be enough, but you might want to consider doing 4. The clue for this is in the mark scheme itself, where it says explain more than 1 or 2 aspects apart from those in the picture. So if you use the source and another 2, technically you may not get level 3. You need more than that. The part C in section B is the real test of knowledge, and it's the real place to pick up marks. Make sure you leave enough time to gain the marks in this section. Even if that means you do the questions in the wrong order, it's worth doing part C earlier on. 12 marks for your knowledge, so this is the biggest test of your knowledge so far. There are no sources to help you, so this is relying purely on what you know and can explain. But in addition to that, 4 marks for your spelling, punctuation and grammar. This is an easy place to pick up marks just by making sure you spell keywords correctly, you write clearly, you sentence and paragraph your answer. Don't waste the opportunity to potentially bump up a grade boundary because you've frittered away spelling, punctuation and grammar marks. C again is about multiples of. So level 2, several factors. How many would you class as several? Several is more than 2. Several is possibly more than a few. Level 3, between 7 and 10 marks, answers that recognise and explain several factors in specific detail. So we're back to this idea about you've got to have done your revision, you've got to know your stuff. You've got to pick this part C, the question C in section B, that you know you can answer in detail. And this is where your evaluation skills come back into it again, because as you're going through in a similar way to when you did 1E in section A, you're evaluating the relative importance. This is a factor in how the Nazi Party were able to come to power. It is the most important factor. Propaganda is less important as a factor, but was still a reason why. That's the sort of evaluation you need to be thinking about doing. Very quickly, just have a look at question 3. Again, why were the brown shirts important? Place them in a broader context. Talk about the essay, and again, obviously they're expecting you to know that the brown shirts were the essay, but put them into the broader context of what life was like at the time. Question 3, or 3B, using the source, explain. Again, needs 3 to 4 reasons why whatever it was happened. And the final question, how important was the Reichstag fire amongst other factors? Again, we're looking for an evaluation of several factors. Several factors in some detail will get you level 2. We need to be aiming ourselves at several factors in specific detail and then evaluating the relative importance of them. If you don't know your stuff, you will not be able to do 1E and the C part of section B because there is no source help for these questions. So revision is key.